Greetings, chess fans. My name is Arturs Neiksans. I'm the leading Latvian chess grandmaster, and I'm continuing the video series about the game of the week. Looking back at one game from the past week's tournaments or chess leagues. Now, one of the most important tournaments last week was the European Individual Chess Championship, and the winner of the tournament was crowned from Serbia. The 29-year-old Aleksandar Indjic, whose result is probably his current highlight of the career. He won the tournament in a nice fashion, 9 points out of 11, clear half a point ahead of the second place, Daniel Darda, and everybody else was trailing even more. So this is his round 6 game that he played against Maksim Chigaev, another 2600 level grandmaster, and I would like to show you why this game caught my attention. So here Indjic opened up with d4, d4, knight f6, c4, e6. The opening part is not really that exciting. So knight c3, white naturally wants to play e4, invites black to play the Nimzo. Here Chigaev played e5. Well, this is considered to be a slightly risky choice, because it gives white the opportunity to play c takes, bishop g5, e3 in the rising cosplate structures. Then Indjic play bishop g5 immediately, which is, again, perfectly playable move. Bishop e7, e3, should castle, knight f3. So as you can see here, the white player is not rushing with the capture on d5. I suppose he was pretty happy, allow black to take on c4 himself. So h6 was included, b6. So far these moves make perfect sense. White has no advantage, to be honest, but it's just a game. So bishop b7, should castle, knight e7, queen e2, c5. Okay, so up to this moment, both players, they played it out in a pretty solid fashion. And notice that none of the players is really taking any pawns in the center. I think that Indjic's idea was that if he's going to take on d5 right now, then after knight e5, let's say bishop e7, queen e7, knight e5, and bishop d5, and even more trades, as you can see, the position just inevitably simplifies. So he's not achieving much, and that's why, since he's the player with the white's perspective, and usually in these tournaments, they really rely on this one move advantage, so he wanted black to take on either c4 or d4 himself. And that's what Chigaev did. So he decided to play c takes on d4. E takes on d4 seems to be necessary because knight takes on d4. Yeah, I suppose it's also a move, but black could just play like knight c5. The bishop goes probably somewhere, d takes on c4, queen c4, bishop a6. Maybe there's suddenly some problems. You see, the rook at f1 is positioned not really that well. So it just basically had to take e takes on d4, d takes, and bishop c4. There you go. So we have a classical IQP position. IQP means isolated queen's pawn structure. The position has its pros and cons. I have recorded 2 bootcamps, by the way, in case you're curious how to play with the IQP and how to play against IQP. But in a nutshell, the player who has the IQP, the isolated pawn on d4, he wants to go for an attack. And this is what Indjic is going to try to do. And Chigaev at the same time is trying to trade off some pieces, because then in the long run, he can claim that the pawn on d4 is the weakness. So the game continued a6, a4, bishop b4. Yeah, one of the ideas for black is that he's having some problems with space advantage, so looking for some trades would definitely favor him. Indjic played rook c1, rook e8, knight e5. Yeah, I'm not sure about knight e5 here. The typical idea for the IQP is that white wants to create the battery, put the bishop on b1, maybe queen e3, and try to somehow get to the square on h7, but maybe it's already not very likely to happen. So Indjic here tried to play something else, knight e5, just centralizing the knight, and now we are getting some simplifications. So knight e5 happened, d takes on e5, white gets rid of this supposed weakness on e5, bishop takes on c3, rook c3, knight e5. All right, there you go. So this is a pretty interesting strategic position, because both players were more or less happy to get here. White has the bishop advantage, 2 bishops on the board, and black at the same time is incredibly solid. Yeah, so black has a knight on d5, it's supported by the bishop on b7, the king is safe. So Indjic continues the original plan to go for an attack. So he plays rook c1 and he attempts to create a battery. So for example, if at some point black is going to play something like g6, try to close this long diagonal, this is going to create more weaknesses at kingset. So Chigaev obviously tried to kill off the bishop, bishop b1, a5, threatening some bishop a6 ideas, rook d1, rook c8, h4. So far, all of this makes perfect sense. Position remains level. And about here, takes, and queen d7. Chigaev decided to simplify the position, hit the pawn on a4, also threatened rook c8, maybe rook d8, control the d file. If the queens disappear from the board, black can never lose. So bishop b4 followed here. Accepting the pawn feels to be very risky for good players like queen takes on a4. You're seeing ideas like maybe queen g4, there's bishop takes on h6 threat, maybe queen e3 double attack, again threatening, for example here, queen b5 takes, queen h6. There's bishop h7 threatening, there's rook c3, rook g3 threatening. So even if Engine says that queen a4 somehow is playable, you can also understand Chigaev that it just feels incredibly risky. So instead he played rook c8 and queen c8, and after queen e2. Now this is one of the first critical phases of the game, so the players have spent already considerable time. For Indjic it's 28 minutes, for Chigaev it's 18, and it kind of feels the game is getting to a draw. However, things are not really so simple because suddenly white has some annoying threat. How do you counter bishop takes on h6? And Chigaev here spends some time, so he spent 11 minutes to play h5, which is inaccuracy. And here it was pretty difficult for him to calculate the precise continuation. For example, here the engine says you can play bishop d5, with the idea that after bishop takes on h6, queen takes on h6, black is alright with the only move knight c2. And white still continues with h5, and black somehow is alright because of bishop e4, queen g5, king f8, and h6 go seemingly nowhere because bishop g6, queen f6, etc. The game continues and somehow it's a draw. I would understand from Chigaev's perspective that this was very scary to go to, even if you see this line, but apparently the best choice for him was to play queen f8, stopping bishop takes on h6, and basically properly evaluate that white cannot crash through using the d file. For example, queen d7, now the queen lifts back to e8, protect the bishop, hits the pawn on g2, and if white plays something like f3, knight e5, try to lock the queen, and black is incredibly solid. As they say, usually the problems start with small inaccuracies. So h5 is the first crack in Chigaev's defense. So black weakens a lot of dark squares. What happened here, Indjic played queen d6, tried to get to the pawn on b6. Knight e5 was played by Chigaev. Bishop g5, look at this beautiful bishop here, already threatening to play bishop d8. Also notice that white cannot crash through or use the c file because here we have the perfect control from the white's perspective. All the critical squares are protected. Also, there's the back rank problem for the king. If the queen leaves the last rank, there's queen d8. King cannot go to h7, that's a mate on the board. And if you play something like g6, it just further weakens the dark squares. So here queen c7 was played by Chigaev. Takes, bishop d8, and now comes another critical moment of the game. Now for some reason, Chigaev didn't really like to play knight e5. Now knight e5, I think he was simply afraid that after bishop e4 he's gonna lose a pawn. For example, king f8, and now white can make this sneaky move, f3. So the point is, white cannot win the pawn immediately like this. Bishop takes on b6, it's just gonna be a draw. So despite the fact that we have an extra pawn from the white's perspective, the obstacle of bishops on the board make white's chances to win the game highly unlikely. But there's this very annoying idea to play f3, and suddenly black is like in a zugzwang. Because if he plays king e8, bishop takes on b6 is a move. And after knight b6, bishop takes on b7, you cannot take on a4 because bishop c6 just hands the knight on the platter. And if black tries to do something else like, I don't really know, king d7, maybe black somehow manages to block this pawn at some point, but do not forget that these pawns are on the color of white's last square bishop, and that's why any endgame for black is going to be pretty dangerous. So that's why here Chigaev probably realized he cannot go here, but actually he could have played knight e5 if he had found bishop a8. So it's a very invisible move here. The point is bishop b6, now there's knight b6, bishop d5, bishop d5 leads just to a draw, and after king f2, king e8, he drives away the bishop and somehow holds on. Now plays maybe bishop c6 and should be able to save the game. Now he played his knight a8, and I perfectly understand he felt that this cannot be a good move because the knight on the edge of the board is a pretty sad piece, but again, game is very concrete. So bishop d3 was played, bishop c6, Indjic played a beautiful bishop b2. I really like this move, so he hit the pawn on h5. And the point is, after bishop takes at a4, actually white is trapping the knight on a8. Not the pawn on h5, but the knight on a8. So here Chigaev had no choice but to play g6, further weaken the dark squares. And now comes b3, king f8, and the powerful maneuver for white. So white first played f3, which is a beautiful maneuver. So he wants to play g4, create a potential pass pawn at a king side. And now here, if black would play king e8, which probably had to be still played after a bishop g5, knight c7, bishop e3, put the bishop on d4, white's gonna go here, play g4, and there's a very good chance that black will have to take on g4 at some point, and white creates an outside pass pawn at the king side, and these pawns are always a big target. So white is not even going after the trade on d5, it's just black is paralyzed. Beautiful knight on d5 that has to guard the pawn on b6 forever. So that's why here Chigaev decided to do something else. He decided to attack the pawn on b3, which turned out to be a huge mistake. I assume he thought that the white's only move here is to play bishop d1, but actually what he missed, that white can sacrifice the pawn on b5. He played bishop b5, and after bishop takes on b3, now this position really resembles me, a famous game of Nigel Short against Jan Timman. You might remember Short's famous king walk, because white has a complete domination on the board, two amazing bishops, black's knight on e8 is really weak. I mean, you cannot capture it because there's always bishop d5, but apart from that, this knight cannot simply move. And here Indjic reminded Chigaev that king is also a piece. Just look at this. Like he played king f2, king e3, king f4. There's nothing that black can do about it because king h6, I think it was here. Also, king h6, it simply is not going to work because white can just play bishop e8, hit a pawn, you have to go back, and then comes king on g5. So here the game progressed with bishop b7, king g5, bishop d5, and maybe here Chigaev was still hoping that the position somehow is going to prevail, because if white plays g4, the pawn on f3 drops, just follow the next moves. So bishop d7, bishop b7, and now comes the break, g4. So black cannot really take it because h5, h6, bishop f6, or h5, h6, king f6, every single black pawn at a king side is gonna fall. So here, Chigaev decided to take the pawn on f3, g takes on h5, followed by g takes on h5, because bishop c6, you need to guard the knight on e8. And here, after bishop b5, king f8, notice, dear viewers, that this is a zugzwang. It's unbelievable, right? So black is up 2 pawns, but he can't move. Because if he retreats with the bishop here, white just takes the pawn on h5. These pawns don't move. f5, en passant take on f6. Knight cannot move. If the bishop goes here, bishop c6, the knight drops. So here black played king f8, king f6, the king is a piece. Black played a bishop here. Now that the pawn on h5 no longer is under attack, another check, bishop d6, black resigned. Black just resigned. So here white is again completely dominating the board. I suppose his idea was to play bishop e8, bishop f7, bishop takes v6, but even this maneuver probably just wins, and try to get the bishop on b7 and collect the knights. So for example here, I think it's just bishop e8, here bishop f7, here bishop e6, the knight doesn't still get out, e6, e7, e8, black is completely powerless. I think this was a very, very powerful demonstration of the bishop pair and the power of the king by Aleksandar Indjic. So this was one of his crucial victories in round 6 to get in the lead of the tournament. At some point he got 1 point lead and he never allowed anyone to catch him again, and then again in the end he was crowned as 2024 European champion. Beautiful game, and the viewers, if you enjoyed the game, please do not forget to press like, write your comments. What do you think about it? By the way, Indjic, in the past years, he has been coached by the Russian chess legend Aleksandar Morozovich, or at least he was in the past for many years. So Indjic's coach is also a world-class player. And of course, please consider subscribing to my channel so that I can produce more content. Thank you for watching. I'm signing off.